In 476 AD, the Roman Empire fell. Every textbook says so. Every history teacher says so. It's basically the most famous collapse in human history. There's just one problem. Nobody told the eastern half. Because while the Western Roman Empire was busy getting sacked, dissolved, and replaced by a bunch of Germanic warlords, the other half of Rome kept going for 1,000 more years, fighting wars, building churches, writing laws, and calling themselves Roman the entire time. This is the story of the empire history forgot to kill, the longest-running Christian empire in human history, the civilization that kept the ancient world alive while Europe was busy having the Dark Ages. And it ends, I promise you, with one of the most dramatic last stands ever recorded. This is the full story of the Eastern Roman Empire, or as literally everyone who lived in it called it, Rome. Let's rewind to where we left off. Constantine, 324 AD. He's reunited the empire after a brutal civil war, legalized Christianity, and made one decision that changes everything. He builds a new capital city on the Bosphorus Strait, the narrow channel between Europe and Asia. He calls it Constantinople, and it is, without exaggeration, the single best located city in the history of urban planning. It sits on a peninsula, water on three sides, a massive chain across the harbor to block enemy ships, walls on the fourth side so thick and layered that for over 1,000 years nobody gets through them. It controls every trade route between Europe and Asia. Every ship moving between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean passes directly underneath it. It's basically a giant toll booth with ambitions. And from this city, the Eastern Empire watches the West slowly collapse without being particularly surprised about it. When the last Western emperor gets politely retired in 476, the East barely blinks. They've been the functional half of the empire for decades already. The treasury is in the East. The trade is in the East. The competent administrators are in the East. They don't call themselves the Eastern Roman Empire, by the way. That's a label modern historians invented. They call themselves Romans. They call their emperor the Emperor of the Romans. Their legal code is Roman. Their military traditions are Roman. The fact that most of them speak Greek instead of Latin is, to them, completely irrelevant. Whether we call them Byzantine or Eastern Roman is an argument for academics. What matters is what they do next. In 527 AD, a peasant's son from the Balkans becomes emperor. His name is Justinian, and he immediately decides that one eastern half of a dead empire is not enough. He wants the whole thing back. This man's ambition is frankly unreasonable and historically fascinating. He sends his greatest general, Belisarius, to retake North Africa from the Vandals. Belisarius does it in 2 years with an army so small that the Vandals didn't believe the invasion was real until it was too late. North Africa reclaimed. Then Justinian sends Belisarius to retake Italy from the Ostrogoths. This takes 20 years, destroys the Italian peninsula, and leaves both sides so exhausted that Italy won't fully recover for centuries. Italy, technically reclaimed. Then he takes southern Spain, just because. At its peak, Justinian's empire wraps around the entire Mediterranean. It looks almost like the old Rome again. He builds the Hagia Sophia, a cathedral so enormous and technically advanced that engineers stood inside it and genuinely could not figure out how the dome stayed up. It stood for 900 years as the largest enclosed space in the world. He also completely rewrites Roman law into a single organized code, the Corpus Juris Civilis, which becomes the foundation of legal systems across Europe and is still directly cited in courts today. But Justinian has a problem. He's trying to rebuild a Western empire he can't actually afford, while the eastern borders are being constantly pressured by Persia in the east. He fights Persia for years, he pays them off, he fights them again. It's expensive, exhausting, and unresolved. And then, completely unprompted, a plague arrives. The Plague of Justinian, 541 AD. It kills somewhere between 25 and 50 million people, roughly half the population of the empire. Tax revenue collapses. The army shrinks. The reconquered western territories start slipping immediately. Justinian dies in 565, having built the largest empire of his era and accidentally set up its slow destruction. This is very on brand for Byzantine emperors. After Justinian, The empire spends the next 4 centuries doing something Rome never really had to do before, surviving. The Lombards take most of Italy back within 3 years of Justinian's death, because of course they do. The Visigoths retake Spain. The Persians, sensing weakness, launch their biggest offensive in centuries. They take Syria, they take Egypt, they take Jerusalem, and carry off the true cross as a trophy. Emperor Heraclius responds by doing something so insane it actually works. He leaves Constantinople defended by its walls and its navy, takes the entire field army deep into Persia, and attacks the Persian heartland directly. He wins, gets Jerusalem back, gets the cross back. He returns to Constantinople a hero, and then immediately a new force explodes out of Arabia, Islam. 632 AD. Within 10 years of the Prophet Muhammad's death, Arab armies sweep across the Middle East with a speed that genuinely stuns the ancient world. Syria falls, Palestine falls, Egypt falls, Persia, the empire Heraclius just destroyed, collapses entirely. The Eastern Roman Empire loses half its territory in a decade. Not because its army is defeated in one catastrophic battle, but because the populations of Syria and Egypt, overtaxed, religiously marginalized by Constantinople's theological arguments they didn't ask to be part of, don't fight very hard to stay Roman. That's the part the textbooks skip. Sometimes empires don't fall because they're beaten. They fall because their own people stop caring whether they survive. The empire contracts, pulls back, reinvents itself around what remains: Greece, the Balkans, Anatolia, modern Turkey, and Constantinople itself. And somehow it holds. The Arabs attempt to take Constantinople twice, in 674 and again in 717. Both times the city's walls hold, the chain across the harbor holds, and a secret weapon called Greek fire. A napalm-like incendiary liquid that burns on water, cannot be extinguished, and whose exact formula has been lost to history, turns the Arab fleet into a floating disaster. The empire develops a new identity, smaller, tougher, more Greek, more Orthodox Christian, and completely convinced of its own destiny. It builds a theme system, military provinces governed by generals, that makes the army faster and cheaper to maintain. It survives Bulgarian invasions, Slavic migrations, and internal coups that would have finished a weaker state. By 1025, under Emperor Basil II, called the Bulgar Slayer for reasons that are exactly as dark as they sound, the empire is actually expanding again. It controls Greece, Bulgaria, parts of Syria, and dominates trade across the Black Sea. It looks, briefly, like the nightmare might be over. It is not over. In 1071, 2 things happen in the same year that together break the empire's back. In the West, the Normans, the same people who conquer England in 1066, take the last Roman territories in Italy. Rome, the actual city, is no longer Roman in any sense. In the East, a Seljuk Turkish army meets the Roman Emperor Romanos IV at a place called Manzikert in eastern Turkey. The emperor is captured in battle. The army disintegrates. And Anatolia, the agricultural heartland that fed Constantinople for centuries, begins falling to Turkish settlers almost immediately. The empire never fully recovers from Manzikert. It's not one collapse. It's a slow bleed. Desperate for help against the Turks, Constantinople appeals to Western Europe, the Pope calls a crusade, European knights arrive, and almost immediately start treating the Eastern Roman Empire as an inconvenient obstacle between them and Jerusalem rather than an ally. In 1204, the Fourth Crusade, which was supposed to go to Egypt, somehow ends up sacking Constantinople instead. The Crusaders spend 3 days looting the richest city in the Christian world, melting down ancient bronze statues for coins, and shipping everything of value back to Venice. The Roman Empire is now a rump state run by crusaders who mostly want to go home. The legitimate Roman government survives in exile in Nicaea and retakes Constantinople in 1261, but the city they return to is a shadow. The population has collapsed, the treasury is empty, the navy barely exists. For the next 2 centuries, the empire is essentially just Constantinople, a few Aegean islands, and the memory of what it used to be. The Ottoman Turks surround it on all sides. They take the city's suburbs. They take the villages. They leave the city itself standing, partly out of respect, partly because those walls are extraordinary. But Constantinople increasingly sits like an island in a Turkish sea. May 29th, 1453, the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, 21 years old, brilliant and deeply aware of what taking Constantinople would mean for history, has been besieging the city for 53 days. He has an army of 80,000. The Roman Emperor Constantine XI has roughly 7,000 defenders. That is not a typo. 7,000 men defending 3.5 miles of walls against 80,000. And they hold for 53 days. Because those walls are genuinely extraordinary, and because Constantine XI refuses to surrender even when Mehmed offers him personally safe passage and the right to leave with his household intact. Constantine's reported response, roughly translated, "To surrender the city to you is beyond my authority or anyone else's who lives in it." He fights until the walls break. The last emperor of Rome dies in the streets of Constantinople, fighting in the crowd, his imperial regalia making him indistinguishable only to history. His body is never conclusively identified. The city falls on a Tuesday. To this day, Greeks consider Tuesday unlucky. Mehmed walks into the Hagia Sophia, the cathedral Justinian built 900 years earlier, and converts it to a mosque on the spot. He calls himself Caesar of Rome. He means it. The Eastern Roman Empire lasted 1,123 years, from Constantine's founding of Constantinople in 330 AD to its fall in 1453. It preserved Greek philosophy, Roman law, and Orthodox Christianity through centuries when Western Europe had lost access to all three. When the Renaissance explodes in Italy in the 1400s, it's partly because Byzantine scholars fleeing Constantinople before the fall carry ancient manuscripts with them. The fall of Constantinople, 1453 AD, is considered by many historians the true end of the ancient world and the beginning of the modern one. All of it started by a peasant son who wanted the whole Roman Empire back, and held together, at the very end, by 7,000 people who decided the walls were worth defending, even when the math said otherwise. History does not just repeat, it rhymes. So make sure you are listening for the next Money Echoes. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.